Hi everyone. Hi, welcome back or welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be wrapping up all of the books that I read in February, and I read quite a few. So yeah, I'm just actually going to not ramble, and I'm just going to get into the meat of this video. We're going to get the most obvious read out of the way first because I did a whole dedicated review to it. I've gushed about it here, there, and everywhere, and it has been a feature of the beginning of this year for me so far. And that is Middlemarch by George Eliot. I love this. This is quite possibly my favorite book of all time now. I think it is amazing and so good. If you are somebody who loves a really intricate plot, fantastic characters, and you have a propensity to enjoy Victorian times, then this is the book for you. So good. So good. Oh, and if you love, if you're just like one of those people who just loves yummy language, this is so yummy. Okay, so Middlemarch out of the way. The next book that I read, although I don't think I'm covering these in chronological order, but the next book I read was The Dead and the Living. I think Fraser at Fraser Simon. Well, by the way, I'm all over. I did read this with the Up to No Good book club, which has Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot, Fraser Simons of the channel Springboard Thought, and Jolene from Bookworm Adventure Girl, along with several subscribers and, more importantly, their friends. So Deb, Angela, and Sonja. And we read this together and discussed it together. Okay, so as I was saying, Fraser pointed out that I have been saying this wrong. I mean, he kindly was like, "You mean The Dead and the Living?" I was like, "Oh yeah, that is the title." But this is a very slim poetry collection by Sharon Olds. I love Sharon Olds. I discovered her for myself. She's been writing for a long time, but I read her for the first time last year and thought her use of language and her ability to dive into her emotions and get the reader to really understand where her heart is on certain subjects, like that of separating from a partner, like having complicated relations with one's parents, like being a mother. All of that she covers in her writing in some form or another. So this is just another one of her poetry collections that does cover similar things. But in this one, she also talks about imagery, specifically photographs. And they are photographs of the dead, people who have died. And what's interesting is that I feel like she does the thing that Susan Sontag from On Photography is imploring her readers to do, which is don't just look at the photograph and feel bad because it's a horrific image. Actually think about what that image is telling you and what it means beyond your own emotions. And I feel like Sharon Olds puts that into practice. And so she is writing in beautiful poetic language what this imagery is and what it means and its impact. And of course she does it in her very Sharon Oldsy way, which is emotional and very impactful, packs a punch. And that's what she covers in The Dead, and also people who have passed in her lives and what they meant. And then in The Living, she again kind of follows similar things, what it means to be a mother, what it means to grow up with an alcoholic father, what it means to have a mother who was in some ways allowed her husband to treat her really poorly, and being a participant of that household, as Sharon Olds was. And so anyway, so I just loved it. I just love her. I love her writing. It's so good. It's so beautiful. It's so resonant to me. And I own one more poetry book by Sharon Olds, and oh gosh, it's just such a treat. She's such a treat. I love it so much. In my to be read video, my TBR, I talked about how I was going to finish Bone by Jeff Smith. And indeed I did. This is a 1,300 plus graphic novel. I did not know, but I found out when I was looking up some statistics for this, that this was published it was serialized over 13 years, which is pretty fascinating. And that when you read it all together, I had no idea that it was published over 13 years. And I really liked it. I read this with my friend Fraser Simons at the channel Springboard Thought. Y'all know him. If you don't, I can't imagine a world in which you don't know who Fraser is. But anyways, I just you know, adore Mr. Fraser. And we read this together, and I think I liked this book more than he did. I don't want to speak for him. Here's the deal. The characters are quite flat, and the plot is incredibly epic. So on the one hand, I'm so glad that I read this because this has been sitting on my shelves for years, for like actual decade plus, because this was my husband's book before we were together. And so it's been on my shelves since I've been with my husband. And so finally having read it, it feels good. And I did enjoy it. Like, I thought the tropes were cute. The tropes were well done. The jokes and sort of the gags were really cute. And that the characters, you know, they served a purpose. They served to, you know, perpetuate the plot, to push the plot forward. And so I like that. I like that. And I thought that the characters of the Bone, which are these guys, were very sweet. And I just liked it. I really liked it. However, if you're not like a character, if you are not a plot-driven reader and you need character development in a graphic novel, in everything that you read, you'll be very dissatisfied with this, because this is like plot to the max. It's so epic. You start off thinking, oh, this is gonna be something, and then it turns into something else. It ends up being like so different than it starts out as. And I like that. I like being surprised. I like when something turns out to be not quite what I expected, especially if it's done well. And this is done well, especially in the plot department. Okay, that's it. I'm gonna go. Speaking of something that didn't work out for me, Spinning by Tilly Walden, which is Tilly Walden, who is a graphic novelist, an illustrator. This is her memoir of her childhood as a not quite elite, an ice skater who wasn't elite. She's just like in the competition circuit and, working on her skills. And it's about growing up. It's about being different, having neglectful parents. What didn't work for me is that she was not thoughtful in the least in terms of like the reflection piece. And you just need, like in a memoir, you need it to have some reflection of why you're telling this story in the first place. And it really fell flat. And I really cannot recommend this at all. So yeah, the one that didn't work out for me. I moved to the side because I have some graphic novel, or a graphic novel, and then an audiobook that I listened to. So the graphic novel that I read I read it on my iPad, which I love. I found out I love reading graphic novels on my iPad. Who knew? But, and not on my Kindle, on my iPad. Okay, and it's The Many Deaths of Layla Starr, and this is by Ram V. I will leave the illustrators and colorist also down below, because the illustrations and the colors have so much to do with why this piece worked for me. It is essentially, it's taking the idea of like Greek gods and goddesses, and it's personifying something that, usually doesn't have a personality. And so it personifies death. And Death has recently been fired from her job. She's not needed anymore because somebody has invented immortal life. And it is the way that Death deals with being in a body and living her life and coming to terms with not being needed anymore. And she also is she's on this path where she converges with another character named Darius, and she is very curious about him. And so it's the way that they interact and what they mean to each other. And it was just so different and thoughtful and thought-provoking. And the art was exquisite. The colors were incredible. It was just such a pleasure to read, and I'm so glad. I started this actually in December, and then I started the book over in January, and I'm so glad that I did, and I got into it this time around, and it was just so good. So I'm just really glad to have read that. And then on audio, I listened to Claire Keegan's Foster. This is my first foray into Claire Keegan. She is more known for Small Things Like These, which is what was nominated for the Booker. And Foster is a very short audiobook, like 2 hours, very, very short. And it tells the story of a little girl who is placed in a foster care situation. Her parents, decide to let another couple take care of her. And without saying too much, you really get this beautiful picture of what this situation means to be fostered to the little girl and what it means to her foster parents and why she ends up there in the first place. It's really touching. It's really touching. And actually, I received this as a recommendation from Mikiko, who was the first interviewee that I did for my Superlative Sunday. So if you haven't seen that, I'm going to leave her superlative down below. She talked about the most impressionable books on her in 2022. And Claire Keegan popped up. And I was like, oh yeah, I had been meaning to read Claire Keegan. And then I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna see if my library has Foster, and they did. And I'm so glad that I listened to it. It was so, like, now that I'm actually thinking on it, it was just really touching. It was a really touching story. And what's nice is that Claire Keegan writes about things in a way where she sort of leads you there and you figure it out. And I thought it was just so beautifully done. It was one of those, like, dare I say, perfect short stories. It was just so good. I just didn't realize how much it impacted me until, like, I'm talking about it now. So yeah, just a really, really lovely, lovely book. And if you have a chance to either read it or listen to it, I would highly recommend it. Claire Keegan's book, I believe, is a novella, whereas the next book is an actual short story. It's a Ray Bradbury short story. It's a reread for me, and it is called All Summer in a Day. You can find this online many places, and it is a science fiction short story it's set in a place where the sun only comes out every 7 years. And the themes of the story are that of what it means to be different, the impacts of being unkind, and yeah, I think it also brings up interesting questions like, what would it be like to live in a world without any sun? And it's just a really sobering, somber short story, but definitely worth the read. It'll take you, 30 minutes to read it, and just fantastic. I mean, Ray Bradbury, there's some things that I don't love about Bradbury, but there are some things that I do, and I feel like All Summer in a Day is one of those stories that really highlights some of the things that I like about Bradbury. Some of the things I like about Bradbury. Okay, I'm going to end this on 2 picture books. I have decided that I am going to count picture books as a book read this year. So I have read over 20 books this year so far. Several of them are picture books. The majority of them are. And I'm going to tell you about 2 of them. The first one is Alien Nation by Sandro Bassi, who is a Venezuelan artist. And I have some close-up footage of the illustrations, and it's interesting. The drawings are fantastic. It's this black and white or charcoal on paper, type of artistry. And it's clearly, Sandro Bassi is clearly saying something about technology and what technology means. There is a clear, it's a wordless picture book, but yet there is a clear exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution, which I think is so cool in a wordless picture book. And I'm always amazed at how one can tell stories through pictures. And anyways, I showed my husband this, and we both agreed that we both like Sandro Bassi's art. It's just cool to look at, okay? Like, it's just cool to look at. So yeah, really enjoyed that one. I also did a whole video on Carson Ellis's picture books, all of the picture books that I can get my hands on that were illustrated by Carson Ellis. And she is an incredible illustrator that I've loved for a very long time. I will leave that video linked down below. So a lot of my picture book reading was dedicated to Carson Ellis's illustrated picture books. And then another picture book that I read for the first time, though I love this illustrator, is Katie and the Big Snow by Virginia Lee Burton. And what I love, let me show you some pictures. What I love about this picture book is partly is the colors. You have this very primary red, you have this very primary yellow, and instead of a primary blue, she gives you a primary green or a secondary green, but it's like right there. Very simple. Virginia Lee Burton is a master at telling the story of an underdog, which is just fun. You know who to root for. It adds some tension because you're like, are they going to accomplish their goal? I don't know. And it's just great. She's also wonderful at personifying or giving personality to, I should say, anthropomorphizing. I talked about this recently in my work, but it's anthropomorphizing machines and, you know, houses and you know, and other things like that. And so in here we have this snowplow that has a personality and that is playing the underdog. And when I just think about her work, I smile. And so I was looking up Virginia Lee Burton recently, and they were saying that she is a very like holistic artist. She comes up with her own typography. She illustrates using the full page, not just little portions of it. And she comes up with all of it, the characters, the setting, she really visualizes the whole thing so that the book is in and of itself an experience. And that's something that I love. It's also, you know, it reminds me the art doesn't feel modern, which I like. I like that the art feels vintage, but it also doesn't feel dated. So it's like I'm walking into another time period, and yet I don't feel like I'm out of place. I'm welcomed and I'm warmed by her art. Anyways, so that's it. Yeah, what is the best thing you've read this month? I would love to know. That's it for me. I think I got everything. I had a relatively wonderful reading month. I was very successful in many reads. And if you want to know the books I did not finish, I will leave, like I DNF'd, I will cycle back around to. I will leave a video I did with Fraser on his channel linked down below because I think I just didn't want to cover it here, and I talked about it in that video, and you might find that illuminating. But anyhow, just let me know, how did your reading month go? What was amazing? Yeah, I would love to know. All right, that's it for me. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye.